Welcome to the Divorce Survival Guide podcast, where we have open and honest conversations about co-parenting, separation, divorce, and the hardest question of all, should you stay or should you go? I'm Kate Anthony, your divorce survival guide, and I'm here to help you navigate some of the roughest waters you've ever swum in and answer some of your toughest questions. I've been to hell and back, and now it's my mission in life to help you get to the other side of this process with your sanity and your heart intact.
Hey everyone, welcome back. In light of recent events, our next few episodes are actually going to be fairly crucial. We have some concerns about how things are going to play out for women in family court and divorce, having no-fault divorce on the chopping block. But we're not really talking about no-fault divorce today. What we are talking about today is women in the family court system. I am joined today by my dear, dear friend, Dr. Christine Cocchiola, and her co-author, Amy Polacko. They have written an amazing new book called Framed: Women in the Family Court Underworld. This collection of 22 women's stories raises awareness about the systemic issues plaguing family courts, aiming to ignite awareness about the family court crisis by sharing voices of those directly impacted. November is Family Court Awareness Month. Tina Swithin started this 5 years ago. This is its 5th year, Family Court Awareness Month. And later on in the week, I will also have Tina on to talk about Family Court Awareness Month and what it means. But in this episode, Dr. Cocchiola and Amy Polacko highlight the deep-seated misogyny and financial exploitation within family courts, emphasizing that this isn't just a U.S. issue, it is a global crisis. It affects women of all races, demographics, and socioeconomic backgrounds. And this episode is really a call for awareness and action. Together, we can advocate for systemic change to better protect victims and their children. But first, we have to get educated about what the family court crisis really is and how it falls short and leaves victims so deeply, deeply unsupported. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Dr. Christine Cocchiola and Amy Polacko. Dr. Christine Cocchiola and Amy Polacko, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us this really important month. We're kicking off Family Court Awareness Month, and you guys have written a book which is all about raising awareness for family court. Tell us more.
Thank you for having us, Kate. We really appreciate it and all the work you do, of course. The book is called Framed: Women in the Family Court Underworld. And at the bottom, we say, "Know the Abuser's Playbook." So it's a compilation of 22 women's stories from around the world, the US, Canada, the UK, and Australia. Our goal is to get people aware and angry about the family court crisis so they will join us in doing something about this. I know it's something you know about quite a bit.
Yeah. So what do you see as the family court crisis? For those who are maybe just entering this or maybe had just a perfectly fine experience with this, what is the crisis?
The family court crisis is that people go into it assuming that justice will be served, assuming that if someone comes forward saying that they suffered abuse or that the children suffered abuse, that the family court is going to take that into account before they determine custody. And the reality is, over and over again, we keep seeing this not occurring. And frankly, when a mother does disclose abuse, she may even lose custodial time or lose custody entirely. There's a systemic oppression going on in systems in general, but certainly in the family court, where patriarchy is literally resounding the bell and everybody is lining up to listen. And it's rather disturbing to even think about that there could be collusion involved, but I do truly believe, and I know Amy agrees, that there is collusion going on and we need to do something to shift the system.
Collusion between whom?
Go ahead, Amy, I'll let you take that.
I think all the court players, I mean, we're often asked, why does this happen? Right? So many of us who enter like a babe in the woods into family court and think it's going to be fair are blown away. It's an upside down world. It's the Twilight Zone. It's a place where black is white, right? And we're asked, why does this happen? Well, I think it's pretty simple. I think one, what Dr. C said about the deep-seated, deep-rooted misogyny in our systems. And two, there are a lot of people making a lot of money off this system. I mean, we recently had this case of a Colorado mom who was jailed for objecting to reunification therapy for her kids with an accused abuser. It was the public outcry. I think it was the embarrassment and the accountability for this judge that made him do a complete reversal. And so many women said, I need that for my case. I mean, we say we have 22 stories in here. We could have had 22,000 plus.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's interesting with that Colorado case too, just to specify that he had been accused of sexually abusing the children, right? So it's not just like, which I hate to say, not just, because so often it's, well, he abused me, and the court says, well, he abused you, but he didn't abuse the kids. In this case, he did abuse the kids. And she was literally willing to fall on her sword and go to jail every weekend for however long, because she was not willing to allow her children to go into reunification therapy with this man who had sexually assaulted them.
Absolutely.
Right?
And he had 7 charges against him and an ankle bracelet. It's not like we were just talking about an allegation. Again, to your point, it's that, and you know this, Kate. I mean, Joan Meyer's study, really shows that victims are disbelieved 85% of the time with sexual abuse and 73% of the time for physical abuse of the children. So how is it that a mother who is trying to be a protective parent is really diminished in that role and actually punished for that role? And as you read the book, I mean, these stories are not an anomaly. It's like an epidemic. It's happening every single day to so many protective parents.
One of the things that I was struck by as well is that, as you say, there are stories from all over the world. Right. So we've got UK, Australia, and the US. Anything else?
Canada.
Canada. Sorry. And so clearly this is not just a US problem. Clearly this is a, Western civilization problem, even though it's not all the West. Right. And so we have such different laws in these 4 countries. And yet the same problem persists. What do you guys make of that?
Patriarchy?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's interesting because, in some other countries, it's probably far worse, right? Mm-hmm. We're supposed to be the quote developed and right on the cutting edge of women's lib and all these things, right? And yet here we are.
Well, that's interesting that you bring that up, because I think we are supposed to be, more advanced. But actually in Australia this past year, they reversed an old ruling we have a call to action section in our book. And in there, we talk about some of the legislation. And I think it was 2006 where Australia pushed for 50-50 shared parenting for everyone. And you know that they've now flipped that and they're reversing it because they realize it doesn't work. We can't mandate 50-50 parenting all the time. Yet the US now has 7 states that have passed it. And it's moving very quickly through states where there is this push to have 50-50 be, the go-to in making decisions about custody. So we are supposed to be advanced, but honestly, we are not. I mean, we could talk about the fact that we live in a world where those who are vulnerable, when we think about coercive control is about exerting power and control over an individual, or it can be done by groups of people, onto groups of people. It's like, I see it as very broad, like racism, sexism, you name it, right? And so, who are most vulnerable in society? Women and children. Did you know that women who are Black are killed ages 15 to 35. It is the number one killer for women who are Black. Domestic abuse. So like, how are we not screaming from the rooftops about this?
Well, right. And they're dying in childbirth at disproportional rates to anyone else, right? Because, quote, nobody cares about Black women, right? It's the most marginalized, means the least taken care of and the least supported certainly in the legal system and in the medical system.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, let me ask you this. First of all, what made you guys decide to write this book, Amy? What was it that finally had you guys go, we got to do this. We got to write this book?
Christine had thought about it for a while, and we talked all the time about, oh my gosh, this client we had, without, of course, revealing details. But, these are horrific stories, and you would think we'd become desensitized in the work we do daily. But
No.
They were so shocking, and we really felt like the world must know this. I mean, in addition to being a divorce coach, I have written as a journalist about some of these issues and tried to shine a light on this. But we felt like if we could compile the stories of several women and show all of these parallels. I mean, there is a playbook that abusers have, even though these stories are very different. We have a diverse group of women, and obviously from around the world. This court system is an abuser's playground. It really is.
Oh, it really is. It really is.
And I just to dovetail on that, I mean, the reality is that people need to be warned before they go into relationships. And that's why we asked we said to people, tell us the beginning of the story. Like, how did you meet? Right? Because these people don't show up with signs saying they're an abuser. And Tina wrote in her epilogue, but she actually has this quote, this book should be a prerequisite for all women. For all women. It should be read before marriage, but definitely before divorce or child custody proceedings. That's Tina Swithin, founder of One Mom's Battle. Everyone should armor themselves with this information. Just to have it.
Kate, I would say there were 3 reasons for the book. I mean, 1, we wanted to validate all of these women who are going through this so they know they're not crazy, they're not alone. And 2, like Dr. C said, to warn women who are dating, who are in marriages and seeing this type of behavior play out. And then 3, we want to create a grassroots movement for change. And we truly believe that's what it's going to take. It's going to be a major social justice movement. And we need people who maybe haven't experienced it to join us as allies.
That's right. That's right. And we need vocal allies. We need more public awareness. One of the things that I find is that we will see these horrific stories on television. We'll read about them. Why, right? I mean, you wrote so brilliantly, Amy, about Catherine Kasanoff, and that just became this is a horrible, horrible story. But everyone kind of feels like it's a horrible story, as opposed to this is the system. This is actually the system. So we're going to take a quick break. And on the other side of that, we're going to pick up where we left off. We'll be right back. We were just talking before the break about how when we see these horrible stories in the news, on television, people tend to think, ooh, what a terrible thing that happened to that woman. This woman in Colorado, oh my gosh, that's terrible that this judge would make such a terrible decision. And he realized he was wrong, so it's not going to happen again, right? But the point of your book is, no, this is happening around the world. And this is actually the norm. These are not isolated cases.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you're bringing up too is that as a society, we kind of disassociate from the bad stories. Catherine's story and what Amy did in really elevating the conversation, and so many other people who felt it so important to bring this to the media. And we had that little time. And then what happened? It's like, it's gone. How is this not we don't want people to become sick or ill, but this is death. This is like harming children. This is intergenerational trauma that can be totally prevented. Like those children, if I could speak for a moment to Colorado, which is a conversation I was having when I was talking to some policy people, is that those children with that abuser for 5 minutes have been so impacted by trauma and long-term the intergenerational problems that they are going to have because of this one time they're forced into the arms of an abuser, the fact that we are not all outraged and not continually talking about all of these things. I mean, Catherine's children live with their alleged abuser. I mean, this is the world that we're living in, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And speaking of the sort of the collusion, right? Because then we've got systems that are feeding off of this. We've got systems that are making money off of this. Can you talk a little bit about that, Amy?
One of the hardest things we do in coaching women, right, is introducing them to this family court world where they are often bullied into hiring all of these experts, this myriad of experts that all have to be paid for. I think it was Danielle Pollock from the National Family Violence Law Center who said women will give their last shoe, right, to save their child. And the court system knows that. And these people know this. Wayne Baker, who is the executor and good friend of Catherine Katzenoff's, says, take a look at the areas where this is the worst. They're affluent areas north of New York City and Westchester County, where Catherine Katzenoff lived. Some of these experts are making hundreds of thousands of dollars. The Katzenoff divorce ended up costing, an estimate was about $4 million for both sides. And they weren't divorced when she passed.
Right.
So, I mean,
into whose pockets? Attorneys. I mean, who else? Were there reunification experts in this?
There were
I don't think so.
Custody evaluators, GALs. I think that's a huge, huge part of what's going on. And then also, right here in the state of Connecticut, where we live, we have Jennifer's Law, which was passed, which expands the definition of domestic abuse to include coercive control. But I wrote a story for Ms. Magazine, I think it's going on 2 years ago now, about how attorneys are not using it because they don't want to, quote, tick off the judge. So there's that going on where they're protecting themselves. I had an attorney tell one of my clients, I'm not about to die on this hill for you. So they're protecting themselves. They want, they're bringing a case in front of the same judge the next day. So there's a lot that when we say collusion, there's a lot of that going on.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't realize that family court, like lawyers, don't have to take a course in domestic abuse.
No.
And frankly, this is wonderful. We have Cadence Law that's going to educate people and keep children supposedly safe. We're hearing stories too about, whether or not these judges are going to allow experts who understand abuse and the abuser's playbook and how they use it in court. Is that how they're going to get trained? Because I'm hearing some stories about judges wanting their own training, like they create their own training and they train themselves. So it's really problematic. And to Amy's point, if you're someone who keeps showing up in court trying to support victims and survivors, I'll tell you what, I mean, even I took the guardian ad litem training here just for intel here in the state of Connecticut. One of the things that's pretty clear to me is that if you have a bias to protect children, you're not going to be in business a long time. You're just not. Your bias needs to be 50-50. That's your bias. And so hugely problematic. And, when you bring up the cost, I mean, I can read you a little excerpt from our book about reunification camps, because this is where the profit is, right? If you can actually make someone pay for a camp so that their children can reunify with their abuser. And, honestly, I had a mom. She wasn't the abuser. She wanted the children to have a reunification camp with her, and she wasn't the abuser. But what we have to understand is that is coercing children. It's like a cult. You cannot try to coerce a child to have a relationship with someone they believe, even if it's false, that they fear. And so, it's just not healthy to the developing brain.
No, it's not. Can you read a little passage
sure.
from the book?
Sure.
Yeah, about that, the reunification stuff. Because I think a lot of people don't really know what a reunification camp is or what that means.
Yeah, this is called the life sentence from Victoria, and it's in the United States. And basically, Victoria and her husband divorced, and the kids did not want to see their dad. They just were not comfortable with him. They preferred mother over father. But then she says, my biggest fear has become my very painful reality. And exactly what experts warned me. These alienation programs and camps operate under the guise of preserving the relationship between the parents and children and do the exact opposite. When I was the primary parent, my children had both parents in their lives. The children were not estranged from Rex. They did not reject their father. They just wanted a better relationship with him. Rex wanted obedience and control and ultimately to hurt me in an unimaginable way. His strategy worked. He and his team cut off all access between me and the children and kept us in a situation where we have no way of knowing when we will see each other again. The court decided that Rex's problematic relationship with the children may be fixed under a temporary order by an immediate change in custody. They were taken to an undisclosed hotel where Dave and his team implemented their intervention, Dave, the reunification camp person, their intense and experimental programming. The children were forcibly placed under the exclusive care of their father, restricted to a relationship solely with him. The children were traumatized by not being allowed to say goodbye to their mother, grandmother, pets, or home. They were isolated from anyone in their past who they love and trust. They were enrolled in a new school, had their doctors changed, and were prevented from receiving individual counseling or trauma care. An indefinite forced mother-child separation and trauma was dictated as the cure while mandating expensive and unregulated treatment protocols. The children were forced into this camp because Rex alleged parental alienation. Yet this was never a finding in our case. The children were deprived of knowing or having access to their mother during the most crucial years of their lives, a cruel and senseless separation spanning thus far over 6 long and agonizing years.
Absolutely horrifying. So alienation is accused and then not found, but the solution to Rex feeling like he's being alienated is to rip the children out of their lives and force them into quote therapeutic setting with their abuser. How is this good for children, right? And it's, oh, but this is in the best interest of the children, right? That's what they say.
Yeah. And the problem is, Kate, is that it's going on everywhere. Like, this is just one story. When Colorado came out, I know Amy and I were thinking the same thing. We have a story like that in the book. I mean, this is just one of a gazillion stories.
One of the things that's really important to note is that these reunification camps cost tens of thousands of dollars. 40 to 50,000. I mean, I remember one of these practitioners telling me that I think it was like a long weekend would be like 40 grand. Are there kickbacks for the judges or attorneys who, recommend these places, right? There are all of these questions. And as you said, Christine, I think what's really interesting is that these are the things that Kayden's Law is about. And I want to talk about Kayden's Law on the other side of the next break, right? That we do have laws that are now, well, they're not laws. Some states have enacted the laws, but we have legislation that we're trying to get passed in every state that would eliminate this. And yet nobody's actually enacting the laws, and even in the states where it is law.
Enforcing, right?
Enforcing. All right. So I want to talk about that on the other side of the next break. We'll be right back. Okay, guys. So before we took a break, we started talking about Kayden's Law, and I don't know, if people have read my book or your book, you might know what it is. Can you explain what Kayden's Law is and why it's not the law of the land thus far? And what does it say?
Sure. Kayden's Law is named for a little Pennsylvania girl, Kayden Mancuso. Actually, we are honored to have her mother as a contributor of the book, telling Kayden's story. And it was passed in 2022. Biden signed it. Kayden's mom was at the White House for this, but it has to be passed on the state level in every state. So it's something the National Family Violence Law Center, National Safe Parents Organization is working on. It's been passed. The number one state to pass it was Colorado, ironically, where we had this case with the mother. Utah, Tennessee, California has parts of it, Maryland, Arizona, and Pennsylvania. So there are 3 main tenets of it. 1, it restricts expert testimony to those who are truly qualified. Secondly, it limits the use of reunification camps and therapies. And 3, it requires evidence-based training to judges and court personnel, which includes coercive control. And as you said before the break, Kate, the key is enforcing this, as we've seen with Jennifer's Law in Connecticut.
I mean, the idea that like the judges are required to have this training, but they're clearly not. There it is. Right, there it is. And when you say that it limits the use of reunification therapies, what does that mean? Like, that's pretty vague.
It is pretty vague.
No reunification treatment may be ordered by the court without scientifically valid and generally accepted proof of the safety.
Again,
I would just
vague.
No, in the state of Connecticut, when we were working on Jennifer's Law, and that was a big problem, is because we had to put this word "shall," that the safety, the physical safety and psychological well-being of children shall be the primary determination. We couldn't say will be. We had to say shall be. It's like there is a play on words, and those words can get easily like murky, and there's a reason for it. There's a reason for the murkiness.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's right. So let's get back to your book for a minute. One of the things about this book is that it's full of stories that are really hard to hear, to read. What do you recommend for women going through it? On the one hand, it's like, you have to read this so you understand and you are prepared. Also, it can be really triggering and scary, right? For women to read this book and then go into the system where they might feel more scared by the system. What's the balance here? And who do you actually recommend reads the book, and when?
I would say that all women should read the book, even if they're 20 and headed out into the dating world. I sure as heck wish I read this book, but I won't get into that today. We hope that women read it who are dating, thinking about getting married, who are thinking about divorce, who are in the process, and who are post-divorce. We have a huge community of people like us who've survived things like this and are reaching back to help the other women. So yes, I mean, Dr. C wrote an amazing, trigger warning in the beginning. I think if people need to read this in small doses, that's fine. I've talked to many of my coaching clients about it, said, I don't want to scare you, but it's my job to protect you. I care about you. And I'd rather have you know this, right? Knowledge is power, because at least we can prepare, because we see women all the time who are just like us, babes in the woods, like walking into family court or doing things that they don't realize is part of the abuser's playbook, that their abuser is manipulating. They have no idea that they're about to be framed. I have to explain to clients sometimes, this is what he's doing. And then the light bulb goes.
I have that conversation with clients all the time. I know both of you do too, that like your reaction to his abuse is the frame, right? That's the frame. And so we saw this play out with Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. He behaved absolutely terribly, as we do. We behave terribly when we're being abused because it's self-defense, right? It's not necessarily terrible behavior, but it may not be the way that we would want to present ourselves, right? But we're so freaked out and nobody's hearing us and nobody's listening, and we get louder and we get a little bit more frantic, and then we look insane. And that is the frame job right there, right? We go into court and we're like, and then he did this, and then he did this, and then he did this, and then he did this. We're now working against our best interests.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I said that well, because I don't want to come off as victim blaming, but at all, right? But when we're triggered, we do things that are not in our natural nature.
Uncharacteristically. We behave uncharacteristically, and we wouldn't behave that way if we were outside of the relationship. And I just did a training today for a large group of mental health professionals. And the conversation is, how can you tell the difference between the abuser and the victim? Ask yourself, who are these people outside of the relationship? because victim survivors are different human beings. They have been oppressed for a long time, and they're going to behave in ways that may trigger us as therapists, like, oh my gosh, she's being controlling. Well, frankly, if all of your control has been taken away for years, and now you just want to go back to court to get fair child-like support, and it feels like she's being controlling, or is she actually just reacting to years of never getting anything equitably? We have to look at the foundation of the relationship. It's just so important, but I don't think we have professionals doing that a lot.
No, certainly not. Certainly not therapists, right? We talk about all the time that couples therapists are not trained in this. They're not trained in recognizing the signs of domestic violence. I guess good. Train them all. And again, not part of the core curriculum when you're studying to become a therapist. Why not? Can you read another? I would really love to hear another story, another excerpt.
All of our stories are horrific and heartbreaking and have their own lessons in them. I mean, we've talked about reunification camps and, of course, the devastating effects to the children, but we've also talked about the financial devastation of what abusers do in court. When they bankrupt a mother and they make her homeless, I mean, that affects the children too, right? And the children witness all of this. That is child abuse. So I want to read just a little bit from Michelle's story. It's called The Abuser's Playbook. She's from the United States. She starts out by saying that, she's $300,000 in legal fees. That's gone up since we have written this book. And
sure.
Right. And I'm just going to read a little excerpt from her story. The reason why I couldn't send Jeremy away is he didn't cross the line. We need to move the line. He'd get in my face, spit, threaten me, pull me places, and lock me in a room. But I didn't have bruises, black eyes, or broken bones, so he wasn't arrested. It's time to move the damn line. I had proof of him locking me in a room, and he should have been arrested. But the police couldn't arrest him because coercive control is not illegal in my state. And if I didn't have an incident of physical violence, there was nothing to report. Jeremy was stalking me, following me with a GPS tracker, but somehow the police believed him when he said, she's abusing me. In one instance, the police came back and took me to their station where I spent an overnight in jail based on Jeremy's claim that I was on drugs and dangerous to him and the children. My husband waved through the window with a sick smile on his face that said, I told you so, while they carted me away. He also called the station repeatedly that night, asking if he could pick me up. Every time I tried to leave, he'd call the police and do the same thing. This happened at least 6 times. The scariest part is they often believed him. And obviously, we've changed the names of all the women in our book, but I can tell you that this woman is a very successful professional and executive for a company we all know, that you would say, wait a minute, you spent nights in jail? Like someone looked at you and your life and who you are as a person and thought you were capable of this. And the answer is yes.
Yep. That is so, and that's so important, because I think I want anyone listening to understand that if it's happening to you, it happens to all of us. It has happened to me. It's happened to Amy. It's happening to Christine, right? It's happened, not happening anymore. We have all lived this. And so this is not about weak women. This isn't about women who have no self-esteem. This happens to women of all socioeconomic demographics, all races, right? All of it. And they really love us when we're like smart and savvy and powerful, because that's way more fun for them to destroy.
They like to have us on their arm. It means a lot to them because they don't love themselves, right? So they want to mirror us and be like us. And I mean, I would even say to your listeners, just in case they don't know, I mean, I've been doing this work since the age of 19. And I've been teaching on this topic and was still in an abusive relationship just because it's not physically violent. And that's another thing. I mean, the story that Amy just read to you, there was some things going on there that you would think, oh my gosh, that's abuse, right? But she even couldn't see it while she was there, right? And so this is what happens. But what of the times when there's absolutely not an ounce of physicality? There's all of this coercion and control it's psychological tactics being used, and victims wonder, what the heck is going on? What's wrong with me? I mean, that 1938 play, Gaslight. I mean, the reality is that, we live in a world where people have more power when they can manipulate and control you. And I think it's kind of a statement of our society too, that these abusers are getting
Sure.
away with it in court. How are they getting away with so much in court? Hugely problematic. I don't know what the answer is. Besides writing a book, getting stories, we love our mothers who contributed. We are so grateful that they entrusted their stories to us.
Well, and I think that this is so important. The book has information beyond the stories, right? It actually also has calls to action, what we can do as a society to help change this. What are some of those calls to action that you might share with our audience today?
We have several things. I mean, one is to believe survivors, right? And we hope that allies who read this will understand. We want everyone to get involved on the local level. And as we explained with Caden's Law, getting involved on the state level. Who are your representatives who care about domestic abuse, who are out there fighting for women's rights? I think becoming involved in that, joining the National Safe Parents Organization, which is mobilizing people nationally to do that. What else am I forgetting, Dr. C?
Being available to victims and survivors so that when they disclose to you, we don't judge them, right? We are available and ready to support them, but knowing that they may not be able to leave. We talk a little bit in the call to action. We talk about trauma bonding, and we talk about the inability sometimes to leave. Sometimes it feels safer to stay. I mean, we're having this conversation right now, and, we're telling people that they should leave or should escape an abusive relationship, but the reality is the abuse gets worse when people leave. It really feels really hypocritical sometimes. We do want victims to escape, and here's the one gift, I think, is that if you're able to escape as a protective parent, your children get to know you for the first time in their life. They never knew you before.
That's right.
And so that's important. And then in that, you're role modeling for them what's acceptable and unacceptable behavior. But no one is judging you if you decide that's not the best option.
Mm-hmm. And I think, we talk about escaping, but we also are very mindful that that is a process, and it can be a long-term process, and that having support systems like the three of us, any advocate, but somebody who really does understand this and can advocate for you as you move through it and help you make a safety plan and set things up so that you can at least do the best you can to try to avoid all the pitfalls that may occur in family court, right? We can set you up so that things can go better than they would otherwise. We can't control the outcome. We can't control the judges and all of those things, but we know how to help you work in the system as best as possible. If you are planning to leave or to escape, you've got to do it with the right support systems.
That's so true. I mean, we know on average it takes 7 times for an abuse victim to leave. And I went back. I mean, I look back. He scared me. He, threatened me, manipulated me. And look, to Dr. C's point about her years as a clinician, not seeing it, I was an investigative reporter chasing people down with a microphone like this hard-nosed reporter, and I fell for it. So I love the fact that you bust that myth, Kate, but it was an attorney who said to me, you should go to the Women's Center. Like this, you need to be in an abuse support group. And I think about, I don't know if you guys have seen that Netflix series Made. I wrote an article for Ms. a few years ago, right? Where she's sitting there, and it's such a powerful scene where the social worker says to her, this is abuse. And she's like, but he didn't hit me, like it is, right? So sometimes it's someone from the outside who's telling us that.
That's right. And the social worker says, first he's hitting the wall. The next time he's going to hit your face. Because as we, Dr. C and I say, abuse doesn't de-escalate, right? And once you become sort of numb to this level, it's going to get worse. Ladies, thank you so much for this. This book is really, really important. I love the title. As soon as you texted me and you're like, this is the book and this is the title and this is the cover photo, I was like, oh my God, right? Calling it framed, right? Because that's what we are. We're framed. We're framed by our abusers and by the system. It's really powerful. So where can everybody find it, the book, you guys?
People can go to NARC Free Press, www.narcfreepress.com. You like that name, Kate? You do.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
Yes. If they go on there, they'll see our trailer. We have a trailer for the book that's kind of exciting, and they can also see various places to purchase the book. The book now is totally available. So if you order it, you'll get it in a couple of days, which is pretty exciting. So yeah.
Very exciting.
Mhm.
Great. And they can get it, they can order it right on the website, NARC Free Press.
They can click right there. Yep.
Good. Amazing. And where can everyone find both of you?
Well, you can find me at my website, freedomwarrior.info. That's my coaching business, Freedom Warrior. And on Instagram, I'm Freedom Warrior Tribe. So
yes, amazing Instagram. Well, both of you. And Christine, you are, where can people find you?
Dr. Cocchiola _Course of Control. I was thinking about this the other day. I got my Twitter name, Course of Control, my Facebook name, Course of Control, and my Instagram name before Course of Control was really elevated in the conversation. And now it's elevated in the conversation, which is pretty exciting. So yeah, so Dr. Cocchiola _Course of Control. So if you just look up Dr. Coach or something, you'll figure it out for sure. People will figure it out. I'm so grateful and thank you for your time.
Oh my God, I love and adore you guys. Thank you so much for this book. Thank you for your work, your partnership and friendship, and all the things. Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Divorce Survival Guide podcast. If you like what you hear, head on over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen in and leave me a review. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram at the Divorce Survival Guide. I'll see you next time, and until then, remember, you, my love, deserve to be happy.